Right, so we come back to look at the common Scoter. And I'll be sharing my screen again as before. Get this to work. There we go. More about common Scoters. And that's our subject for the next 20 minutes or so. Considering the common Scoter, there was an article again. It was our bird of the month for October. Admittedly, not the most common bird of the month, I would say. It's quite a scarce one. I do try to make sure that they're quite common birds in that column so that you've got a chance of seeing them. But also, just for a bit of variety, we included this one, again, written by one of our staff writers. And it'll be a supplement sort of thing to that issue. And you're going, why on earth am I showing you a picture of Ellesmere in Shropshire? There's good reason. Because it was here that I first saw a common Scoter. Now, admittedly, it's a bit of an odd place to see one. I'll come on to that in a moment. Now, it was quite a long time ago. It's when I sort of first began to be interested in birding, probably around, I won't try and give a date in case I'm wrong. It was around, I'd say, probably the end of the day. And we stopped off by Ellesmere on the way back to relations where we were staying. And there were these two strange birds in a very odd place. They were beside the edge of the water. They were sort of in the shallow water around the edge of the mere being the main mere at Ellesmere, rather than the other smaller ones. And my father photographed them. I couldn't find the photograph, otherwise I would have shown it to you. But he took the photograph, and when I got home, I was able to look it up in a bird book. And I thought, what on earth is this bird? And I thought, it must be a common Scoter. It was the only thing it could have been. There was nothing else that actually matched up to it. Common Scoter fitted the bill, if I may say that, about a bird. Now, if we consider the location of Ellesmere in Britain, here's a picture, a map. And Ellesmere is approximately where the red arrow points to. That's where Ellesmere is. That's where I saw this common Scoter for the first time. And if you look at that map, you can see it's quite a way inland. Ellesmere is quite a distance inland, admittedly. I mean, you could talk about some counties as being landlocked, but there's nations which are far more landlocked than anything can be in Britain. But this is landlocked in comparison. It's not really anywhere near the coast because common Scoter are found near the coast. Apologies for the poor graphics, but you can see there, illustrated, they're coastal birds. You can find them on the stretch of coast along the western side of Wales, on the north, and then sort of interestingly, they're found a bit more often inland when you get to sort of Birmingham, but not there. That is a patch where there's very, very few records of actually seeing common Scoters inland. It was most strange. To this day, I don't know why I saw common Scoters there at Ellesmere, but that is my most memorable occasion of seeing common Scoters. And subsequently, in my mind, they've always been a little bit more common than some of the birds which are found at sea, which are difficult to see often. But this is the only time that I've seen them inland. Because as you can see from this map, this is a map of where all the places that I've ever seen common Scoters. So you can see there's a marking in the wrong place, I think. Never mind. There's one in Harlech. That's the one which is near the corner of Porthmadog, where the Cardigan Bay goes round, and there's the corner onto the Llŷn Peninsula. Saw one there on the sea. And then further down, the arrow is meant to be at Aberdyfi. on the Dovey Estuary, where the RSPB Nature Reserve Innishere is. That was where I saw another one, or another flock, I should say. And then, of course, Ellesmere is the arrow that's inland. In the south, the arrow in the centre, as it were, just above the sign saying, just above the part where it says Portsmouth, though Portsmouth isn't in the sea. There, that was Titchfield Haven again. You may remember Titchfield Haven from the Brent geese talk. Saw Brent geese there. Also saw common scoter on the other side of the roadway on the sea itself, between the mainland and the Isle of Wight. That's where I've seen them there. And also again down near Eastbourne, where the other arrow is, near Beachy Head, on both sides of Beachy Head, actually, at Seaford and at Eastbourne proper. Now, this is Eastbourne Harbour. That's the red arrow here. It's the other side of there properly. This is Eastbourne Harbour. This is a place where often birds will come for shelter when it's been, say, rough outside. When it's rough on the sea, the conditions are rough, then birds will come into areas like this. As they use the Solent, they will come into that area to shelter. And so they will often use these more sheltered areas, as the area is between the mainland and the Isle of Wight, and harbours and other small coves, things like that, they will often use for shelter in order so that they can survive the rough conditions out at sea better, because inside harbours usually there is shelter, there is peace, and there is a certain degree of safety. This particular harbour, Eastbourne Harbour, I know to have been a good place for birds. If you go there on a normal day, you may not find very much because it's a harbour. So herring gulls, black-headed gulls, cormorants, probably. There was probably one on that green buoy, if you can just see that just below the 5 knots max sign. That was a favourite spot of a cormorant, I remember. Lots of gulls, basically. Not really much else. It appears to be big stretch of open water, and there really isn't as much as you'd have expected from it. Admittedly, on the day I went, I did find a black redstart amongst the rocks, which I was rather pleased about, but there's very little. Now, one day I never saw it, I heard that there was a black guillemot in Eastbourne Harbour. The conditions had been rough outside the harbour, and a black guillemot, which is quite a rare bird down here in Sussex. It's sort of perhaps 2 or 3 every year, nothing more than that. One of these black guillemots came into the harbour, and wow, the photos they got. It came really close to the edge, and people were able to watch one of these birds really close up. That was amazing, because these birds, black guillemots, they usually nest on cliff ledges or on boulders at the feet of the cliffs, much like guillemots and razorbills. And to see one this close up was just something else. But this is a place where you might see common scoters. They can come in. When I was there, there is a point, I believe it's that Martello Tower, I think, that you can see on the horizon. Just there, you can stand and you can look out to sea for a good distance in both directions along the beach or on the shoreline. And I did some sea watching from there once, and I saw common scoters from there. But the trouble is, they're very distant, and it's difficult to see them at a distance to identify them properly to be what they were. And this, of course, is Titchfield Haven. I think I had a similar picture before of this place. The common scoters were on the wrong side of the picture, looking the other way. I never took any pictures. I don't know why, but I should have done, obviously. Now, do you think you'd find a common scoter here? Basically, it's a sort of a wet woodland area. You've got this little stream running through it. It's all very pleasant. There's lots of trees around and roots and all sorts of plants which grow in damp places. Are you likely to find a common scoter here? The answer is no. You're even less likely to find one here than you are at Ellesmere. Are you likely to find one here, though? You may know Rye Harbour. It's quite a famous nature reserve. It's down by a river and there's coastal pools. Do you think you might find one there? Possibly. Not necessarily. You're more likely to find one looking out to sea. But it may be that some will come in sort of closer to the shore. In rough weather, they may even fly into these inland, slightly inland pools. Obviously, they're on the coast, but they are a little way further inland than the beach, which is on the horizon of this picture. So what about this place? Could you see them here? Of course. You know, this is another RSPB reserve, South Stack, another one in Anglesey. And from here, I believe they often do sea watching. And you'll sea watching, they have telescopes and things, and they can scan the sea for a good distance, and they can watch it and they can see common scoters passing. Sometimes, given their position, they're jutting out, the common scoters could come in quite close. You need suitable weather conditions, i.e. wind blowing in towards the shore, ideally. That's the best thing, to have the wind blowing into the shore, because that will blow the birds closer. And also the roughest weather you can find, which generally puts most people off of sea watching. They are the best conditions to find such birds in, because if it's raining, howling gales, and the waves are quite high, they're more likely to fly inland, or they're more likely to fly right by the coastline rather than flying miles out to sea. It means that you wouldn't need a telescope to see them, although you probably wouldn't be able to hold a telescope upright because it would probably get blown over very quickly. And what about this place? Is that a good place to see a common scoter? On the south coast near Seaford. Again, you can look that up on a map later. And yes, this is a good place. We're on the coast. As I said, we're near Seaford. We're also near Beachy Head, which is a point jutting out into the ocean. So, points jutting out into the ocean are very good places to find common scoters and things, because the birds will pass closer to get a shorter journey than they would, for instance, for bays. If you have a bay, they may cut from point to point rather than going all the way in round the bay and expending energy. So the points are the places to look for. Find points. Bits sticking out into the ocean. That's where you're likely to find them. So this is a common scoter, a male common scoter, I should say. Again, I imagine this was a bird that was inland, because you wouldn't find that sort of views on the coast. And there isn't really an awful lot I can say about the plumage. They're very black, glossy black. They have black bills as well, but they do have this little bit of yellow on the nose, on the beak, sorry, covering the nose area, which helps to identify them. But their blackness helps to identify as much as anything else. The fact that they're black does help to identify them. We'll come on to that in just a moment. Now this is the female, and this is brown. There's many, many, many female ducks are brown. The males are generally more nicely dressed. They generally have colorful plumage. The females are almost always brown. So we have a brown female, but what is the main point about this? You can see, perhaps from the picture, there is a little yellow on the bill again, but the head is split in half into two colors. You've got the darker brown above, the lighter brown below. That is important. The very fact that the rest of it is brown, again, serves to prove the point that this is a female common scoter. Now this is another species of scoter. This is a velvet scoter. I must confess to being a little ignorant when it concerns to how on earth it got the name of velvet scoter. But there we are. It's called the velvet scoter, and there's the yellow on the beak. It's a little more extensive, admittedly, But there's also this broad white stripe in the wing. It's unmissable. When the bird's flying, you can't miss it because it is on the underwing as well as the upper wing that is white. So it's virtually unmissable. The females have it as well, which means that you can quite easily tell these apart if you see them well enough, because one has white in the wing, the other doesn't. The common scoter is common. It has nothing of note. The velvet scoter is something special. It has white in the wing. That's one way you can think of it. And then I did manage to get a picture of the female of the velvet scoter. And notice that even without the white in the wing, you can tell this apart from the common scoter. Look at that head pattern. Do you remember what the common scoter's head pattern was? It was that darker brown with the break between that and the lighter brown below. And here, there are two whitish spots, one at the front of the head and one at the back of the head. But otherwise, the head is uniform in color. That is one way it is easy to tell them apart. And it may be said that common scoters are found commonly around the coast of Britain, all of it, during the winter. But the rest of the year, they are found further north, generally speaking. Usually, many of them go really further north. They leave our isles altogether, and they will go to other countries further north to breed. Some of them, however, do stay in Britain and they will breed. You can see from this rough map that there is a resident population, that is what the green signifies in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, and also a summering population, which is the yellow. The summer birds are, for the most part, further inland. These migrate either to the coasts or further south in winter. But the resident birds generally stay there, and the resident birds are usually near the coast. They stay there all year round, they breed there, and they overwinter there. They don't move. And the BTO reporting rate, again, is unfortunately a little bit skewed for this species because it's sort of rarely recorded, and therefore it doesn't really get justice. But you can see that in the autumn again, they do peak. And you remember that week 43 is the week that we are now in. That week is, if I can find my mouse, here, which lines up approximately with that peak, with that highest peak. Again, another reason why we included this species in the magazine last month, because this is the month when it peaks. They're most commonly reported from the month of October and the end of it this week in particular. So you may say, where can I find common scoters? I mean, how can I find them? Because you say they're common around the coast. Specifically concerning that in a moment. But notice that observers at Selsey Bill is down in West Sussex. It's a place where they do a lot of bird watching. There's a regular few bird watchers who will be out there every day doing their patch birding, recording the birds that they see. They produce a blog which is called Birding the Selsey Peninsula. You might like to look that up later, the Selsey Birder. And on there, they have reports from every year to see how the birds have done in the spring and so on. And this was one of the reports that they gave of the common scoter, I think, in this spring. They had 6,055 east. Huge numbers. Well above the average of 4,406. And it's a matter of 1,876 on the 24th went past Selsey Bill. That is impressive. But these big numbers are going past these places and they can be seen. You need suitable days with suitable conditions to find them. Now, here's a map of southeast England with Selsey marked in yellow. Selsey Bill is that sort of area which juts out into the channel And that is obviously a place which is jutting out again. Again, we see this recurring. Good place for sea watching. And if you look at that map, can you see any other places which might be good places for such things, where such birds might be found? Places which jut out into the ocean. There's one here on the Isle of Wight. That's one. There's another one here. That is, of course, Beachy Head. There's another one here. That's Dungeness. There's another good RSPB reserve just inland from there. But from there, you can go to the coast and you can sea watch from, I believe there is a sea watching hide there, from the beach and watch out to the sea to see what is passing by. Also, around Dover, I believe, is a good place to sea watch. It's not really a pronounced bit sticking out, but at the same time, it is sticking out into the ocean to a certain extent. And of course, Margate, which is very much sticking out. Not only in a smaller manner, but by a bigger manner, because Kent is sort of the corner of the British Isles. In that corner of the country, that is a good place for sea watching as well. So here's a challenge for you before we take a break for a few minutes. See if you can find a map, perhaps of your local coastline or the coastline nearest to you, and look for all the points that jut out. See if you can find which points jut out and where would be a good place to sea watch. Where would be a good place to see a common scoter from? So we'll take a 10-minute or so break now, and we will be back for the Chiff Chaff in around 10 minutes, as I say.